Hi again, it's Jason from Fraser Valley Rose Farm, and today in this video I want to cover off two of the most common questions I'm asked about my soil that I use here on the nursery. One is, where do you get it from? And number two is, do you mix it yourself? Now, I do get it from a local supplier. They mix it for me, and I want to answer also why it is that I choose not to mix my own soil. So that local supplier is a place called Sumas Grow Media, and if you have a good potting mix supplier in your area, somebody who does custom mixes of potting soil, I really suggest you start looking into that as an option as compared to mixing your own. Sumas Grow Media has been a really good supplier for me, and there are a couple of good local suppliers of potting mix, but they've always steered me the right direction. For those of you who are local or regional, that is lower mainland of BC or Washington State, I will link their information down below because they've been really solid for me. As to the reasons I don't mix my own potting soil, the number one reason and most important to me is consistency. I have a pile behind me here of 12 yards of soil I brought in for a big job. I'm going to be potting hundreds of roses today, and because of that, I really want a good consistent mix. I just pulled out one pot of this, and it has some components in it. It has bark in there, it has a mixture of shredded wood fiber, it has perlite in there, it has fertilizer in there, and I can be sure that when I get it professionally mixed that it's going to be the same mix in the first pot as it is in pot 200, which is really important for me because I'm going to be treating them all under the same irrigation. They're coming in at the same stage of growth. I really want them to maintain that consistency throughout their growth, and because of that, it's really important that I get a good consistent product inside of the pot. Reason number two I don't mix my own potting soil is for time savings. This greenhouse here, I put in a new ground cloth over the winter, and today I will more or less be filling the entire thing with roses. Now, that's a lot of work on its own. If I had to do the mixing of the potting soil at the same time, it would take me many times longer. Probably it would take a 1-day job and turn it into a 3 or a 4-day job, and I'm not exaggerating. I guess it does depend on what you have for mixing equipment. But here is a solution where I can get my soil for a good price, get it delivered, and be ready to go and not have to have any special equipment of my own to mix the soil consistently from beginning to end. Number three reason why I like to go with a professional mixer is because of customization. You know that primarily my main crop is roses, which I'll be potting a lot of today, and for that they give me a mix that has actually a really good amount of drainage. My roses, fresh in pots, don't like to sit in too much moisture. It's a bit of a chunky mix, again free draining, but if I were growing something different, they can give me a completely different mix. So when I've gone to my soil supplier and I've said I want something for annuals, they're able to give me a much more peat and perlite kind of mix that's much looser and allows the annuals to take off a little bit quicker. Professionally, I use the same soil mixer for my employer, and they've been able to give me specific mixes for shrubs, for perennials, for annuals, for tropicals, for succulents. Basically, whatever I need in that soil, they can give me a specific soil for that purpose. And even if I don't have preferences, on roses I definitely do have preferences to what my custom mix should include, but if I don't know enough to say what I want in a mix, they've done mixes like this for other customers. They know exactly what should go into an annual mix and what shouldn't. A fourth good reason and consideration why I use my bulk potting soil supplier is because of cost. They save me money. So look, yeah, I'm in a small nursery business. I don't get to come back and do this year after year unless I start to make some money. So being that soil, along with plastic and the plant itself, are one of the three things that go into my pot, the cost of my pot, then I really have to watch that cost carefully. I feel badly for people who are in an area who can't find a bulk soil mixer because you generally will pay a lot more, especially if you're buying your potting soil in bags. The small bags, I mean, forget about it. The medium-sized bales, I'm talking the peat and perlite bales, things like Pro Mix or Sunshine Mix, they get a little bit better than the small bags, but still cost per pot is relatively high and probably double what you're paying for bulk soil. Once you get to those really tall bales, now I'm talking the skyscraper bales of peat and perlite mix, they get a little more competitive. They're probably about 20% more than the bulk soil mix, but then you have to have materials handling. You have to have a forklift or forks to move this thing around. Generally, you have to have a bale breaker to break this thing down. So it's a lot more difficult to handle, and it costs you more to boot. So if you're in an area that has bulk soil suppliers, definitely that's a slam dunk against buying packaged or pre-mixed soil. Now, as for the cost comparison of mixing it yourself, you have to keep in mind that when these potting soil suppliers buy their supplies, they buy them by the truckload. They're getting really, really bulk rates on this soil. And so compared to you going out and buying your own bark mulch and having to compost it, or buying your own peat bulk, or having to buy your own perlite, you're going to be paying more for each of the components that go into this thing. You'd have to crunch those numbers real hard to find any savings in it for yourself, especially once you consider in what you're using, what kind of mixing equipment you're using. Now, certainly there is a chance you could just buy and mix by hand, but then, of course, you're going back to all the labor that goes into this. So for my money and every bit of consideration that I've given it, this is saving me money rather than costing me money. Before I finish up here, I want to give you a closer look at a couple of the mixes that I use for two different purposes. The one on the left here I use for seeding, and the one on the right is the bulk mix that I just received for potting my roses, my perennials, and my other shrubs. And I hope you can see right off the bat that there's a big difference in the texture between these two mixes. The one on the left is made by ProMix. It's a peat and perlite mix, ProMix HP, so it's really meant for propagation and seedlings. And if you look at it closely, you'll see that it's a very, very finely chopped peat, and then some fine particles of perlite in there as well. Probably about a ratio of 75% peat to maybe 25% perlite. And they probably only have a couple of other things in there, maybe some lime to try to neutralize the pH of the mix, and probably some wetting agent to try to overcome the hydrophobic nature of peat moss, which is a mouthful. On the right there is the much coarser mix, and I hope you can see, and maybe I'll pull some pieces out here, that there's some bigger chunks of composted bark mulch in there, and by volume that's probably up to about 40% of the mix is these chunks of composted bark mulch. It does have an amount of perlite in there, but the perlite, as you can see, is not as much. It's maybe only up to about 10% of the mix, and it's a much coarser grade of perlite. The idea of this mix is to be quite loose and airy, so that the young roots find everything they need and can work through it very, very quickly. If you look at these yellow bits here, I hope you can see those ones there, that's the fertilizer that I have incorporated in there. So the roots really have nothing to be wanting for to grow in their first 2 to 3 months of establishment. They have their fertilizer, they have a nice loose mix, they have lots of air, lots of moisture. Now, one other ingredient I wanted to comment on here is that obviously this one here is made out of peat moss, which there's some question about the renewability of that resource. This one here, the finer particles that you see in there, are actually made of a shredded fresh forestry fiber. And that one is just from my supplier. It's something they've done to try to obviously secure their supply and remain a little bit more sustainable. It's also cost competitive with the peat moss. So overall, two different mixes for two different purposes. This one I get in the 3.8 cubic foot bales because that's plenty for my kind of seeding. This one I get in bulk for all of my major potting going through the spring season. All right, I'm going to get the tractor out now and start scooping this over to pot some roses. Thanks so much for watching today. If you have any questions or comments about the use of potting soil or potting mix and bulk soil suppliers, please drop those into the comments below the video and be happy to help out.